The courtroom was so silent, you could hear a heartbeat echo. A 4-year-old girl sat on the witness stand, her legs too short to reach the floor. The judge's voice trembled with patience as he leaned forward and asked softly, "Do you see the man who hurt you and your mother?" Every camera, every eye, turned toward the accused, a man who'd been called a monster for months. The prosecutor's smile was small and certain. But then, something no one expected happened. The girl's eyes drifted away from the defendant. She looked across the room, her little hand clutching a worn teddy bear. Then, with trembling fingers, she pointed, not at the accused, but at a police officer sitting quietly among the crowd. Gasps filled the air. The judge froze. The officer's face went pale. And then, the little girl whispered 3 words that changed everything. "He saved us." No one could have predicted that those simple words would unravel one of the biggest cover-ups the city had ever seen, or reveal a truth far deeper than anyone imagined. The air inside the courtroom was heavy, thick with the kind of silence that presses on the chest and slows every heartbeat. The dim light filtered through narrow blinds, cutting the room into stripes of shadow and gold. Reporters filled the back rows, their pens poised above open notepads, waiting for a headline worth bleeding onto paper. A camera clicked once, then stopped. Even the sound of it felt intrusive here. At the front, the judge adjusted his glasses, his voice calm, but carrying authority. "Court is now in session." The scrape of wooden chairs followed as everyone rose, then sat again. In the defendant's seat sat a man in his early 40s, tall, hollow-eyed, his hands clenched together like a prayer that had gone unanswered for too long. His name was Daniel Moore, and he had already spent 6 months behind bars awaiting this day. The accusation against him was monstrous. The evidence, circumstantial. But in this court, perception often weighed heavier than proof. His lawyer, a weary man with sharp eyes, leaned close. "Just stay calm. Whatever happens, don't react." Daniel nodded slightly, his lips pressed together. He had no strength left for words. Across the aisle, the prosecutor shuffled her files with the confidence of someone used to winning. She didn't even glance at Daniel. To her, he was already guilty. The real theater would come now, in the form of the witness everyone had been whispering about for days. The judge glanced toward the door. "Bring in the key witness." A low murmur rippled through the audience. Heads turned. Cameras clicked again. Softer this time. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and a small figure appeared, dwarfed by the tall bailiff walking beside her. A woman in plain clothes, a social worker, held her hand gently. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Her steps were tiny, hesitant. Her eyes, wide, dark, searching, darted nervously from face to face. In her other arm she carried a stuffed teddy bear, its fur matted, and one ear torn. The bear looked older than she was. The entire room, which moments ago buzzed with restless anticipation, now fell utterly still. Even the prosecutor's confident smirk faded. The social worker whispered, "It's all right, sweetie. Just like we practiced, remember? You're safe here." The little girl didn't answer. Her lips trembled, but she clutched the bear tighter. One could almost hear the soft rustle of its worn fabric in the quiet. When they reached the witness stand, the judge leaned forward, lowering his tone, as if afraid to frighten her. "Hello there. What's your name?" Her voice was barely audible, a fragile thread. "L. Lily." The word hung in the air, like a secret. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He had never seen this child before. But something about her innocence made the accusation feel even heavier. How could someone think he'd hurt a child like this? "Lily," the judge said gently, "thank you for coming today. I know this must be very hard, but we just need you to tell the truth, okay?" The little girl nodded once without lifting her gaze. She stared down at her shoes, dangling far above the floor. A tear slipped silently down her cheek and landed on the bear's head. The social worker brushed her shoulder reassuringly. The prosecutor stepped forward, her tone unnaturally soft. "Lily, can you tell us what happened that night?" The girl swallowed. Her eyes flickered briefly toward the rows of strangers. Every face seemed to loom, unfamiliar, judging, waiting. The walls themselves felt closer now, pressing inward. I don't remember," she whispered. The prosecutor's smile tightened. "That's okay. Take your time. Do you remember who was there with you and your mommy?" Another pause. The little girl shifted, her small fingers digging into the bear's fur. Her breathing grew uneven. The social worker leaned in again. "You're safe, Lily. No one here can hurt you." For a moment, the silence stretched so thin, it could have snapped. Then Lily raised her eyes, big, glassy, haunted, and looked across the courtroom. Her gaze drifted past the prosecutor, past the judge, until it landed on Daniel. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Daniel froze, afraid to move, afraid to even blink. Would she point at him? Would that single gesture end his life? Her lips parted, but no words came. The judge's voice trembled slightly as he spoke again. "Lily, do you see the person who hurt you or your mother in this room?" The girl's hand quivered, hovering above the bear. She looked again, left, right, searching the faces like they were pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite fit together. The seconds felt endless. Every eye followed the slow turn of her head. Reporters leaned forward, pens suspended. The defense attorney exhaled through his nose, ready for disaster. Lily's eyes, so small and frightened, swept across the courtroom once more. Then, she stopped. Somewhere near the back row sat a man in uniform, a police officer, quiet and still, his cap resting on his knees. He hadn't moved since the trial began. He was just there, as part of security detail, or so everyone thought. Lily blinked, her brow furrowing, as if recognizing something long buried. Her small arm lifted, trembling. Her voice broke the silence like a prayer cutting through darkness. "He saved us." The words hit the room, like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. No one even breathed. Then whispers exploded through the crowd, reporters scrambling for quotes, people turning in disbelief. Did she say saved? Who is she pointing at? The officer. What's going on? The judge's gavel struck wood. "Order! Order in the court!" But order had already left the room. The officer she had pointed to, Ryan Hale, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. His eyes widened, his throat tightening. He hadn't expected to hear her voice again. Not here. Not like this. Daniel's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this changes everything." The prosecutor tried to speak, but faltered. Even she was shaken. The judge leaned forward, his tone uncertain now. "Officer, do you know this child?" Ryan rose slowly, removing his cap. His voice was rough, quiet. "Yes, Your Honor, I rescued her and her mother 3 weeks ago, a kidnapping case." The courtroom erupted again. Gasps, shouts, chaos. The journalists scribbled furiously. Daniel Moore just stared, numb, as the walls of accusation around him began to crack. Lily clutched her bear and hid her face in the social worker's arm. She had done what no adult dared, spoken the truth, in the only words she knew how. And in that dimly lit courtroom, beneath the cold echo of the judge's gavel, the shadow of doubt finally began to shift. Just enough for the light of truth to slip through. The silence in the courtroom was so complete, it almost hurt to breathe. The judge's questions still lingered in the air. Like a ghost no one dared disturb. Every eye was fixed on the tiny girl in the witness chair. Lily, her legs swinging above the floor, her teddy bear crushed tightly to her chest. "Do you see the person who hurt you or your mother in this room?" The judge's voice was soft, but its echo seemed to vibrate through the walls. The court waited. Reporters leaned forward, pens frozen mid-air. Even the old ceiling fan above the jury box had stopped creaking, as if afraid to interrupt the moment. Lily's gaze trembled, drifting slowly from the judge to the prosecutor, then toward the defense table where Daniel Moore sat motionless. The accused man's heart thudded painfully in his chest. Every second that her gaze lingered on him felt like an eternity tightening around his throat. "Please, God," he thought, "please don't let her say my name." The prosecutor's lips curved slightly. She could feel victory coming. This was it. The key witness. The final blow to a case she had already imagined celebrating. Cameras clicked once, twice. The entire room leaned in as Lily's small fingers twitched around her teddy bear. Her lower lip quivered. Her breathing was uneven. The social worker knelt beside her, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Just tell the truth. That's all." Lily blinked hard. Her lashes were wet. She looked at Daniel again. His tired eyes, his trembling hands, the way he seemed more afraid than angry. Something about his face didn't fit the fear she remembered. Then, slowly, her gaze drifted past him, past the lawyers, past the crowd of strangers sitting behind the rail. She seemed to be searching for something or someone. The tension thickened. The judge leaned forward. "Lily, can you point to the person you remember?" For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, she did. Her small hand lifted from her lap, fingers shaking. Every eye followed that movement. It didn't point toward the accused. It didn't turn toward the prosecution's table. Instead, her arm extended toward the far side of the gallery. A single finger rose, and she pointed, not at a criminal, but at a police officer sitting quietly among the spectators. The gasp that followed was almost physical, like a wave crashing through the courtroom. The officer, Ryan Hale, blinked, stunned. He hadn't expected to be noticed, much less named. His hands, folded neatly on his knees moments ago, twitched open in confusion. Lily's voice trembled as she spoke. thin, but clear enough for everyone to hear. He saved us. The words seemed to hang in the air, trembling between disbelief and revelation. For a long moment, no one reacted. Then, chaos. Reporters burst into frantic whispers. The judge's gavel slammed down once, twice. "Order! Order in the court!" But even his voice couldn't contain the storm those 3 words had unleashed. The prosecutor stood frozen, her confident mask cracking. "Saved? What does she mean by saved?" she muttered. Daniel's defense attorney's eyes widened. He looked at his client, then back at the officer. Holy God, this changes everything. Daniel sat in stunned silence, not daring to move. His pulse raced, relief and confusion crashing together in his chest. He wasn't the monster she saw that night. Tell X slow. Maybe, finally, someone would believe that. Meanwhile, the little girl lowered her hand, burying her face into her bear. The social worker whispered comfort, but tears had already started rolling down her cheeks. The judge cleared his throat, his voice trembling with something that almost sounded like awe. "Officer, please identify yourself." The man in uniform stood slowly, every movement deliberate, as if the wrong gesture could break the fragile reality of what just happened. "Officer Ryan Hale, Your Honor," he said quietly. I don't know what this is about." The judge's brows furrowed. "Do you know this child?" Ryan hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Yes, sir. I believe I do." The room collectively inhaled. He continued, his voice thick, shaking slightly. 3 weeks ago, I responded to a call about a mother and her daughter abducted on the east side. They were found in an abandoned warehouse. This little girl and her mother. The judge blinked, astonished. "You were the officer who rescued them?" "Yes, Your Honor." The words detonated through the courtroom like fireworks. Reporters erupted again, scribbling furiously. Cameras flashed. The prosecutor's jaw tightened, her entire case structure collapsing in seconds. The defense attorney slammed his palm on the table. "Then the witness wasn't identifying the attacker, Your Honor. She was identifying her rescuer." The judge's gavel thundered again. "Order!" But even he couldn't hide the flicker of emotion in his eyes. Shock mixed with something softer, deeper. Lily peeked from behind her bear, her voice breaking the noise once more. "He came when it was dark," she whispered. Time, chapter 600 Mums. "He helped us. He said, 'You're safe now.'" Every heart in that room faltered. Ryan looked at her, recognition dawning in his eyes. He remembered that night. The little girl clinging to her mother as he carried them out. The blood, the smoke, the way she wouldn't let go of her teddy bear even as the sirens wailed. And now, weeks later, she was here, testifying before the world, and pointing not at evil, but at the man who had saved her life. The judge finally exhaled. "We will recess immediately. Bailiff, escort the witness out. Officer Hale, remain present for questioning." The gavel struck again, but this time its echo carried a different weight, the sound of truth cracking through deception. As the court dissolved into chaos, Daniel lowered his head into his hands, his body shaking, not from guilt, but from the sudden, dizzying rush of relief. Lily was led out gently by her social worker. Her small voice echoed one last time in the corridor before the doors shut. He's a good man. Inside, the room remained suspended between disbelief and wonder. The journalists had found their headline, but the story was far from over. Because in that one trembling moment, with a single lifted finger and 3 innocent words, a 4-year-old girl had undone months of lies. The courtroom that had been drenched in shadows now trembled under the first light of truth. And somewhere deep in the silence that followed, Officer Ryan Hale sat frozen, realizing that the past he thought was buried had just returned, and the case before him was about to reveal far more than anyone had ever imagined. The memory came back like a nightmare wrapped in thunder. 3 weeks before the trial, before the courtroom, and the whispers of truth. The night had opened with rain, relentless, cold, and alive, with the kind of fear only darkness can carry. The wipers struggled across the windshield as Emily Moore gripped the steering wheel. Her knuckles were white, her eyes darting between the slick road ahead and the rearview mirror, where her daughter, Lily, sat drowsy in her car seat, hugging her teddy bear. The radio hummed softly, a lullaby, a fragile thread of peace. "Almost home, sweetheart," Emily murmured. "Then warm milk, okay?" Lily nodded sleepily, eyes half closed. The rain beat harder. Streetlights shimmered through the wet glass, turning the world outside into shifting streaks of gold and shadow. The night was uneventful, until it wasn't. At first, Emily thought the lights behind her were just another car, but then they grew brighter, closer, too fast. She frowned, glancing into the mirror again. The black van was closing the distance, its headlights flashing once, twice. "What on earth?" she whispered. The van swerved. It came out of nowhere, cutting sharply across her lane. Tires screamed. The steering wheel jerked out of her hands. Emily's sedan skidded sideways, spinning through a puddle, before slamming to a stop against the curb. Lily screamed, "Mommy!" Emily's head hit the side window. For a heartbeat, everything went white. Then, doors slammed open. Boots splashed in the rain. Shadows moved. 2 men in black masks rushed toward the car. What do you want?" Emily shouted, fumbling for the door lock. But it was too late. One of them smashed the window with the butt of a gun. Shards of glass rained across her lap. Cold air and rain poured in as rough hands yanked the door open. "Get out!" She screamed and kicked, twisting, clawing at the man's sleeve. "Please, my daughter!" But the second man was already at the back door, pulling Lily out, the child's terrified sobs slicing through the storm. "Mommy! Mommy, help me!" "Let her go!" Emily cried, fighting harder. A fist struck her temple. The world tilted, went dim, but she didn't stop. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. This wasn't a random attack. The way they spoke, calm, trained, it was organized, planned. Her mind raced. This isn't about money. She remembered the stories her husband, Daniel, had told her, about the company he'd worked for, about whispers of corruption and stolen funds. He had said he was going to testify against someone high up. The timing, the threats, it all snapped into place. They weren't after her. They were sending a message to him. She looked at Lily, who sat on the cold floor, still clutching the wet remains of her teddy bear. Emily's heart shattered. "I'll get us out," she thought, "no matter what it takes." Hours passed. The rain outside slowed to a mist. But the storm inside her chest raged on. She tested the ropes at her wrists, wincing as they cut into her skin. One of the kidnappers caught her movement and smirked. "Don't bother," he said. "No one's coming." He was wrong. Miles away, in a dimly lit precinct, Officer Ryan Hale was finishing a double shift. When a call came through, a missing persons report, a mother and child last seen near Route 17. Something about the dispatch hit him wrong. The name, the pattern, the van. He grabbed his jacket and radio. "Send me the file. I'll take it." Back at the warehouse, the kidnapper's radio crackled. A distorted voice came through. "Move them tonight. The boss doesn't want the cops sniffing around. Finish it." Emily's stomach dropped. Finish it. The men started gathering equipment. One loaded his gun, another grabbed Lily by the arm. Emily lunged, knocking over her chair, screaming through the tape, desperate to draw their attention away from her daughter. For a moment, everything was chaos, the flicker of light, the echo of boots, the child's cries. Then, the sound of tires outside. A car door slamming. A voice shouting from the rain. "Police! Drop your weapons!" The kidnappers froze. One turned toward the entrance, cursing. The light bulb flickered again, casting long shadows across the floor. And there, silhouetted in the doorway against the storm, stood Officer Ryan Hale. Gun drawn, soaked to the bone, but unflinching. The night of fear was about to change course, and for Emily and her daughter, the nightmare was far from over, but somewhere in the darkness, hope had finally found its way in. The memory came back, like a nightmare wrapped in thunder. 3 weeks before the trial, before the courtroom, and the whispers of truth, the night had opened with rain, relentless, cold, and alive, with the kind of fear only darkness can carry. The wipers struggled across the windshield as Emily Moore gripped the steering wheel. Her knuckles were white, her eyes darting between the slick road ahead and the rearview mirror, where her daughter, Lily, sat drowsy in her car seat, hugging her teddy bear. The radio hummed softly, a lullaby, a fragile thread of peace. "Almost home, sweetheart," Emily murmured. "Then warm milk, okay?" Lily nodded sleepily, eyes half closed. The rain beat harder. Streetlights shimmered through the wet glass, turning the world outside into shifting streaks of gold and shadow. The night was uneventful, until it wasn't. At first, Emily thought the lights behind her were just another car, but then they grew brighter, closer, too fast. She frowned, glancing into the mirror again. The black van was closing the distance, its headlights flashing once, twice. "What on earth?" she whispered. The van swerved. It came out of nowhere, cutting sharply across her lane. Tires screamed. The steering wheel jerked out of her hands. Emily's sedan skidded sideways, spinning through a puddle, before slamming to a stop against the curb. Lily screamed, "Mommy!" Emily's head hit the side window. For a heartbeat, everything went white. Then, doors slammed open. Boots splashed in the rain. Shadows moved. 2 men in black masks rushed toward the car. "What? What do you want?" Emily shouted, fumbling for the door lock. But it was too late. One of them smashed the window with the butt of a gun. Shards of glass rained across her lap. Cold air and rain poured in as rough hands yanked the door open. "Get out! Send me the file. I'll take it." Back at the warehouse, the kidnapper's radio crackled. A distorted voice came through. Move them tonight. The boss doesn't want the cops sniffing around. Finish it. Emily's stomach dropped. Finish it. The men started gathering equipment. One loaded his gun. Another grabbed Lily by the arm. Emily lunged, knocking over her chair, screaming through the tape, desperate to draw their attention away from her daughter. For a moment, everything was chaos. The flicker of light, the echo of boots, the child's cries. Then, the sound of tires outside. A car door slamming. A voice shouting from the rain. Police! Drop your weapons! The kidnappers froze. One turned toward the entrance, cursing. The light bulb flickered again, casting long shadows across the floor. And there, silhouetted in the doorway against the storm, stood Officer Ryan Hale, gun drawn, soaked to the bone, but unflinching. The night of fear was about to change course. And for Emily and her daughter, the nightmare was far from over. But somewhere in the darkness, hope had finally found its way in. The gavel struck again and again, but order refused to return. The courtroom had erupted into chaos after Lily's trembling words. He saved us. Whispers buzzed like electric static. Reporters spoke into recorders. Defense attorneys argued across the aisle, and the prosecutor's confident mask had begun to crack. The judge's voice thundered over the noise. Enough! This court will recess for 48 hours. The witness's statement must be investigated immediately. That single sentence shifted the air. It wasn't just a pause. It was the beginning of something bigger. Daniel Moore sat frozen, his hands gripping the table as if it were the only solid thing in his world. He couldn't believe it. After months of being branded a monster, hope had finally broken through. Small, fragile, but real. Beside him, his lawyer exhaled sharply. We're not wasting a second. This changes everything. Detective Marcus Cole stepped out of his unmarked car, the city lights glinting off the rain-slicked pavement. He'd been called in at the judge's request, an independent investigator known for his blunt honesty and refusal to bend to politics. The courthouse loomed behind him, but his focus was on the files in his hand. Case 3472B, kidnapping, Moore family, sealed. Sealed. That one word burned in his mind, like a warning label. He muttered to himself, why the hell would a kidnapping involving a police officer and a child be sealed? Inside the precinct, the late shift was quiet. The hum of fluorescent lights, the soft clatter of keyboards filled the air. Cole's partner, a younger detective named Jenna Park, looked up as he entered. You're still digging into that case? I thought it was closed. Closed? He dropped the folder on her desk. Try buried. Someone made sure this never saw daylight. He flipped the file open. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance stills from the warehouse rescue, medical reports for the victims, and a brief mention of Officer Ryan Hale as the responding unit. But then, nothing. No continuation. No signatures. Just a red stamp, sealed under internal review. Cole frowned. Internal review, my ass. This is a cover. Jenna scanned the report. And the accused? Daniel Moore? Says here he used to work for Westbridge Holdings. Cole looked up. Westbridge. That name keeps showing up lately. She nodded. Yeah. Financial fraud, smuggling, corruption, all under investigation. You think it's connected? Cole leaned back, rubbing his jaw. Everything about this case feels connected. The kidnapping, the sealed files, and now the same company employing the man on trial? That's not coincidence. He grabbed his coat again. We're going digging. The next morning, the defense team was already in motion. Daniel's lawyer met with Cole and the judge in chambers, files spread across the table like a battlefield. Your Honor, the lawyer began, the witness's statement identifies Officer Hale as her rescuer, not the perpetrator. Yet the report of that rescue was intentionally sealed, which strongly suggests deliberate suppression of exculpatory evidence. The prosecutor interrupted, her voice sharp. That's speculation, not fact. The file was sealed for the child's privacy. Cole slammed the folder shut. That's not how privacy seals work, counselor. Someone hid this. Someone high up. The judge's expression hardened. Bright tone, slow pitch. Detective Cole, are you suggesting interference from within law enforcement? Cole hesitated. I'm suggesting a cover-up. That could go beyond this room. The judge's eyes narrowed. Then you have my authorization. Conduct a full review. Every name, every connection. It was official. The investigation was back on. That night, Cole sat in the glow of his computer screen, scrolling through archived records. He connected dots no one wanted connected. Westbridge Holdings, shell companies, falsified reports, and police informants who'd vanished. And there, a name repeated several times. Arthur Gaines, CEO of Westbridge, currently under federal suspicion for organized crime ties. Cole clicked deeper. An email chain appeared, encrypted, but partially recovered. The words chilled him. The Moore situation is handled. Ensure no link to Hale or the child remains. His stomach dropped. So that's it, he whispered. Daniel wasn't the target. He was the scapegoat. He printed the file and grabbed his phone. Jenna, meet me at the courthouse in an hour. We're reopening the case. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed again, but this time the mood was different, tighter, more volatile. Cole arrived with a stack of documents under his arm. Daniel looked up from the defense table, eyes hollow but flickering with hope. Officer Ryan Hale sat behind him, summoned for questioning. The prosecutor shuffled her notes, tense, uncertain. Cole addressed the judge. Your Honor, I've reviewed the sealed kidnapping file and uncovered evidence suggesting deliberate suppression. The accused, Daniel Moore, was a former accountant at Westbridge Holdings, the same corporation now under investigation for racketeering and child trafficking. Gasps filled the courtroom. Reporters leaned forward, pens scratching furiously. The kidnapping of Mrs. Moore and her daughter wasn't random, Cole continued. It was retaliation. Daniel Moore discovered financial records implicating Westbridge in illegal activities. Before he could report it, his family was targeted. The prosecutor stood abruptly. Objection! This is conjecture without corroboration. Cole shot her a cold look. Then maybe you should explain why your office signed the order to seal the evidence. The room froze. The judge's gaze turned toward her. Is that true? The prosecutor hesitated. I acted under instruction from the district office. I was told it was a matter of state security. Cole leaned forward, voice low and sharp. Or was it to protect the people funding your campaign? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge struck the gavel hard. Enough! But the damage was done. The truth had started to unravel. As the session adjourned, the crowd emptied into the hallway. A storm of murmurs, flashing cameras, and headlines forming in real time. Ryan Hale stood near the doorway, eyes lowered. Daniel approached him slowly. For the first time, there was no anger between them, only shared confusion. The sense that both had been trapped in a web spun by men far more powerful. Cole walked past them, muttering, "This isn't over. We're just getting started." And somewhere above the chaos, in offices where secrets were currency, someone watched the news unfold and whispered into a phone, "They know too much. It's time to clean it up." The investigation had begun to pierce the darkness, but it also awakened something dangerous. And in that quiet, rain-washed night outside the courthouse, truth itself became a hunted thing by the next morning. Officer Ryan Hale's quiet world was gone. News vans lined the street in front of his modest suburban home, their cameras aimed like rifles. The air buzzed with static from microphones and shouts from reporters desperate for a soundbite. "Officer Hale, did you falsify your statement? Were you involved in the kidnapping cover-up? Is it true you're connected to the accused?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Every question felt like a bullet. He couldn't dodge. He pulled his cap lower, face shadowed, and pushed through the chaos toward his front door. His neighbors watched from their porches, whispering. The same people who used to wave at him now looked at him with suspicion, as if the hero who once protected their streets had suddenly become a stranger. The door slammed shut behind him, muffling the noise, but not the damage. His house, once a refuge, now felt smaller, colder. He leaned against the door, eyes closed, heart pounding. The television flickered on its own as the remote slipped from his pocket. Every channel played the same footage, his name scrolling across the bottom in bold letters. Hero cop or hidden accomplice? The reporters had already built their story. They always did. Images of him in uniform, rescuing the child, juxtaposed with clips from the trial. The little girl pointing, the gasps, the confusion. Context was gone. What remained was sensation. Ryan sat heavily on the couch, hands trembling. His phone buzzed with unanswered calls from the department, his captain, friends who didn't know what to say. One text caught his eye, short and cutting. "Don't come in. They're opening an internal review." He let out a dry laugh. Of course they were. When the world turns on you, it never does it halfway. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the roughness of exhaustion and regret. He had done everything by the book. He'd saved that little girl, risked his life, told the truth. But now, because he was the thread that unraveled the wrong people's secrets, he was being painted as the villain. His eyes wandered to the framed photo on the shelf. Him and his wife years ago, smiling by the lake. Her hair caught by the wind, her hand resting on his chest. She was gone now, murdered in a robbery that went wrong, a case that had never been solved. He had joined the force not out of ambition, but out of guilt, the desperate need to make sure no one else lost what he did. He picked up the photo, tracing her face with his thumb. "You'd tell me to stand tall, wouldn't you?" he whispered. "Even when it hurts." A knock at the door pulled him back. He ignored it. More reporters, no doubt. But the knocking grew louder, sharper. "Officer Hale, this is Detective Cole." Ryan opened the door. Cole stood there in the rain, trench coat soaked, eyes sharp. "You shouldn't be here," Ryan muttered. "Neither should the press, but they seem to like your lawn." Cole replied dryly. He stepped inside without waiting. I came to warn you. They're building a case against you. Someone inside the department's leaking false leads. Says you doctored the rescue report. Ryan laughed bitterly. They think I saved a kid to cover up a crime? Cole's jaw tightened. They're scared. You pulled the wrong thread, Hale. The Westbridge files go deep. Money, politics, even cops on the payroll. You exposed their mess without meaning to. Ryan turned away, pacing. So what do I do? Keep my head down while they tear me apart? Cole's eyes softened. You do what you've always done. Protect the truth. That kid believes in you. Don't let them bury that. Ryan didn't answer. He just stared out the window, at the cameras flashing through the rain. He felt small, like the world had turned too fast for him to hold on. Later that night, he sat in his car outside the hospital. He wasn't there on duty. He just couldn't think of anywhere else to go. The sterile hallways, the soft hum of machines, brought a strange kind of peace. He found himself standing in front of the children's wing, where he'd once visited Lily after the rescue. The nurse recognized him. You came back, she said softly. She talks about you, you know. Says you're her hero. He smiled faintly. I doubt she'd say that now. The nurse shook her head. Kids don't care about news headlines, officer. They remember kindness. She handed him a folded piece of paper. She drew this for you. Said you forgot it last time. He unfolded it. Crayon lines filled the page. A stick figure drawing of a man in blue standing beside a little girl holding a teddy bear. Above them, in uneven letters, were the words, You are my hero. His throat tightened. He sank into a chair, staring at the drawing as if it were a lifeline. All the noise, the rumors, the hate, it faded for a moment. He remembered the look in her eyes that night in the warehouse, the pure, unwavering trust of a child who believed the world could still be good. But now, even that memory felt fragile. He folded the drawing carefully, tucking it into his pocket. Then he leaned forward, his hands clasped, his voice barely above a whisper. How do you keep doing the right thing when it only breaks you? The nurse didn't answer. Maybe no one could. Outside, thunder rolled again. The storm hadn't passed, not in the sky, and not in his heart. As he left the hospital, reporters still waited by his car, their lights cutting through the dark like judgment. One shouted, Officer Hale, is it true you lied under oath? He stopped, water dripping from his jacket, his voice calm, but weary. The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs surviving. Then he got into his car and drove off into the rain. A man who'd saved lives, now trying to save his own. That night, alone in the dim glow of his dashboard, the tears finally came. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet. Heavy sobs from a man who'd carried too much for too long. He pressed a hand to his chest, over the bruise where the bullet had struck his vest weeks before, and whispered to no one, I'd take the hit again, if it meant she was safe. The city lights blurred in the rain-streaked windshield. Somewhere out there, the truth waited, battered, buried, but still breathing. And as Ryan Hale drove deeper into the storm, he didn't know whether he was running from his past or toward his redemption. 4 days had passed since the courtroom fell into chaos. Outside, the city moved on, Headlines shifting, whispers fading. But inside the courthouse, the air still carried the weight of unfinished truth. Reporters crowded the steps once more, their cameras pointed toward the wooden doors that would soon open for the most anticipated session yet. The little girl was coming back. Inside, the atmosphere was different now, quieter, not tense with accusation, but heavy with expectation. The judge entered, robe trailing behind him, his voice steady as he called the court to order. The defense table was ready, files organized in neat piles. Daniel Moore sat straighter than before, still nervous, but with a new kind of hope flickering behind his eyes. Beside him, his lawyer gave a brief nod. Across the room, the prosecutor looked pale. Her confident rhythm was gone. Every tap of her pen seemed to echo doubt. The door opened softly. The social worker appeared first, then Emily, the mother, her hand holding her daughter's. Lily walked carefully, her small shoes clicking against the marble floor. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She wasn't trembling this time. Her teddy bear was clutched close. But her chin was lifted, her gaze steady. The judge smiled faintly, gentle but firm. "Welcome back, Lily. Are you feeling a little better today?" "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice was stronger, clear. That small sound carried through the room, like sunlight breaking through clouds. The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, before we proceed with questioning, we'd like to present a piece of evidence recently approved for release, a recording from Officer Hale's body camera on the night of the rescue." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor stiffened. "Objection! That footage was part of a sealed investigation." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled. The seal has been lifted for review by Detective Cole's request. Let the record show this material is admissible." The attorney nodded and pressed play. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen flickered to life, grainy footage in shades of gray and rain. The timestamp showed 3 weeks earlier. Ryan Hale's voice crackled through the static. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Gunfire erupted. The camera jolted violently, then steadied, showing him diving across the floor, shielding a small figure, Lily, with his own body. The echo of gunshots filled the room, but the sound that truly silenced everyone came next. "You're safe now." The clip froze on that moment. Ryan's arm around the child. The reflection of fear and relief in her tear-streaked face. When the lights came back on, the room was utterly still. Emily was crying softly, her hand pressed to her mouth. Jurors blinked away tears. Even the judge looked away briefly, his composure cracking, just enough to reveal the man behind the robe. The defense attorney's voice broke the silence. "This is the man our witness pointed to, the man she said saved her." He turned toward the jury. "Does this look like a criminal or a protector?" The prosecutor said nothing. Her gaze was fixed on the table, fingers trembling as they twisted her pen. Emily leaned toward the microphone. Her voice shook at first, then grew firm. "That night, I thought we would die. My daughter and I owe our lives to Officer Hale. He didn't just do his duty. He risked everything." The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mrs. Moore." Then he turned to Lily. "Would you like to say something, young lady?" All eyes turned toward her. The little girl looked around the courtroom. The judge, the jury, her mother, the officer sitting quietly in the back. Her small hand clutched her bear tighter, and then she spoke. "He told me not to be scared," she said softly. "He said he'd keep us safe." And he did. Her words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They carried truth, pure and unshakable, cutting through every lie that had been spoken. Tears streamed down Emily's face. Daniel bowed his head, overcome. Across the room, Cole watched from the back row, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Even the reporter in the front row lowered her camera for a moment, as if taking a breath, after witnessing something sacred. The judge leaned back, his voice quieter now. "Officer Hale, please stand." Ryan rose slowly. His eyes glistened, but his expression remained humble. "On behalf of this court," the judge said, "thank you for your service and your courage. This city needs men who do what's right, even when the world turns against them." Ryan's voice was rough when he replied, "Just doing my job, Your Honor." A ripple of emotion moved through the room. It wasn't applause, just a quiet wave of shared humanity, the kind that needs no sound to be heard. The prosecutor finally stood, her tone subdued. "The state withdraws its remaining argument against Officer Hale and acknowledges the new evidence as credible." The defense attorney rose immediately. "Then we move for a full review of the charges against my client, Daniel Moore." The judge nodded. "Pitch 'em first." "Granted. The jury will reconvene after review." For a moment, everything stilled, then broke. Emily turned and hugged her daughter tightly, whispering, "You did so well, sweetheart." Lily smiled faintly, wiping her eyes. Ryan stood at the back, silent, his heart too full for words. The chaos, the pain, the scrutiny, it all felt distant now. What mattered was this: a promise kept, a life saved, a truth finally seen. As people began to file out, Daniel approached him. For a second, they just looked at each other, two men connected by tragedy and fate. Daniel extended his hand. "Thank you," he said simply. Ryan hesitated, then shook it. "You don't owe me thanks. Just make sure the right story gets told." Daniel nodded. She just did. He looked over at Lily, who was giggling quietly with her mother again, a sound that felt like life starting over. The courtroom, once heavy with accusation, now felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. The world outside was still full of noise, but inside these four walls, something sacred had been restored. Justice didn't roar that day. It whispered, through the voice of a child who remembered not fear, but faith. And as the judge adjourned the session, Lily looked back one last time and waved at the officer who'd kept his word. He smiled, not as a hero, not as a man trying to prove himself, but as someone finally at peace with what he'd done. Because sometimes the loudest redemption doesn't come from victory, but from the quiet truth of a promise kept. The next morning, the courthouse overflowed with tension. News of the body cam footage had already spread, and the media called it the trial that turned itself inside out. Cameramen lined the hallways, but inside the courtroom, the world felt smaller, quieter. The kind of silence that comes before truth crashes down. Detective Marcus Cole sat at the prosecution table, though technically, he didn't belong to either side. He wasn't there to accuse or defend. He was there to expose. His notes were spread before him like pieces of a broken clock, and he was finally ready to show how they all fit together. The judge entered, his tone brisk but weary. "We are reconvening to review the findings presented by Detective Cole. The court will hear his statement in full." Cole rose, adjusting his tie, his voice low, but sharp enough to cut through the air. "Your Honor, over the past 48 hours, my team and I have followed a paper trail linking the kidnapping, the sealed police report, and the false charges against Mr. Daniel Moore. What we found confirms one thing. This was never about one crime. It was about control." Murmurs rippled across the room. The prosecutor straightened in her seat, face pale. Cole continued. "The original kidnapping report filed by Officer Ryan Hale was intentionally suppressed by an order from within the department. That order came from a senior official with ties to Westbridge Holdings, the corporation at the center of our investigation." He held up a document, the inked signature circled in red. "Deputy Commissioner Arthur Gaines." A collective gasp filled the room. Reporters' pens scratched furiously. Cameras flashed like lightning. Gaines, seated in the second row, went rigid. His jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed fear. Cole's voice grew harder. "Gaines used his authority to bury Hale's report because it exposed Westbridge's connection to organized trafficking, the same network that ordered the kidnapping of Mrs. Moore and her daughter. Daniel Moore, who uncovered their financial crimes, was made the scapegoat to protect them." The judge's gavel struck once. "Detective, do you have evidence to support this claim?" "Yes, Your Honor." Cole motioned toward a large screen at the front. "Play Exhibit 14. The lights dimmed again. On screen appeared an audio file, grainy but clear enough. Two voices spoke in hushed tones. The audio ended. The silence that followed was devastating. The judge's eyes narrowed. The prosecutor looked ready to sink through the floor. Gaines stood abruptly. "This is out of context. That recording is illegal." Cole didn't flinch. "It was obtained through a warrant, signed by the district judge last night. You can confirm it." The judge's tone was icy. "Sit down, Commissioner." Gaines's voice rose. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Cole replied calmly. "Oh, I do. A man who thought his power would hide the truth forever." Two federal marshals entered quietly from the back. The audience turned as they walked forward, their badges glinting under the lights. One read from a paper, voice steady. "Arthur Gaines, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and abuse of authority." The once imposing official froze, his face drained of color. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. The marshals cuffed him calmly and led him through the aisle. Flashbulbs followed every step. In the chaos, Daniel Moore sat motionless, tears streaming silently down his face. Months of fear, shame, and isolation dissolved into a single moment of release. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering, "It's over. You're free." The judge struck the gavel 3 times, his voice ringing out over the noise. "Order! Order in this court!" The room stilled, trembling with the weight of what had just unfolded. He looked down at Daniel. "Mr. Moore, in light of the new evidence, this court hereby dismisses all charges against you. You are fully exonerated." Daniel's breath caught. His mother wept in the gallery. The defense attorney exhaled, eyes wet. Then the judge turned toward Ryan Hale, who sat quietly in the back row, his uniform crisp but his expression solemn. "Officer Hale," the judge said softly, Justice would not have been possible without your integrity. You risked your life for that child, and your career for the truth. On behalf of this court and this city, thank you. Ryan stood, uncomfortable under the weight of so many eyes. Just did my job, Your Honor. Cole smirked faintly. Yeah, that's what all the good ones say. The judge's gaze softened as he turned toward Lily. And you, young lady? Lily blinked, surprised. Her mother nudged her gently. She stood on her chair so she could be seen. You reminded us all, the judge continued, that courage doesn't always wear a badge or a robe. Sometimes it comes from the smallest voice in the room, one brave enough to speak when grown-ups stay silent. The courtroom erupted in applause, not loud or theatrical, but raw, the kind of sound born from hearts breaking open. Even the bailiff wiped his eyes. Emily pulled her daughter close, whispering, You did it, sweetheart. You told the truth. Ryan turned away, emotion tightening his throat. He hated being called a hero, because heroes don't get to feel broken. And he did. He thought about his wife, about the nights he questioned whether doing the right thing still mattered. And now, standing there, he realized something simple but profound. Maybe it always had. Outside the courthouse, the world waited with flashing lights and hungry microphones. But inside, the storm had finally cleared. Justice, real, messy, human justice, had found its way through. As the judge adjourned, Cole approached Ryan and clapped him on the shoulder. You still think truth doesn't need defending? Ryan gave a tired half-smile. No, I think it just needs someone stubborn enough to hold on to it. Cole nodded. Then don't let go. Lily ran up to Ryan before leaving, holding out her teddy bear. You can keep him. For luck. Ryan crouched down, smiling softly. No, sweetheart. He belongs with you. You're the brave one. She shook her head. Then we'll share him. She hugged him tightly before walking away, her hand in her mother's. Ryan stood there long after the courtroom emptied, watching the sunlight stream through the high windows. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like interrogation light. It felt like dawn. Weeks passed. The chaos had faded, replaced by a calm that felt almost unreal. The trial was over. The city had moved on to the next headline. But for Ryan Hale, quiet didn't mean peace. It meant space to finally breathe, to finally feel. He stood outside a small suburban house holding a paper bag in one hand and a soft, worn teddy bear in the other. The bear looked different now, its torn ear sewn neatly, its fur brushed clean. Time and care had erased the mud and blood from that night, but the memories stayed stitched into its seams. Ryan hesitated before knocking. He had faced gunfire without flinching. But this simple act, made his heart beat faster than any bullet ever could. The door opened slowly. Emily stood there, her face lighting up in surprise. Officer Hale, she whispered. Then her expression softened into something warmer. Ryan. He smiled awkwardly, removing his cap. Didn't mean to intrude. I was in the area and thought I should return something that belongs here. Her eyes fell to the teddy bear in his hand, and for a moment, her composure broke. You fixed it? Yeah, he said softly. Seemed like he'd been through enough. From somewhere inside, the patter of small footsteps echoed down the hallway. Mommy, who's at the door? Lily appeared, hair tied in messy braids, wearing a yellow sundress. The instant she saw him, her face lit up. "Officer Ryan!" She ran full speed into his arms. He barely had time to kneel before she wrapped herself around him, small arms tight around his neck. Her laughter, pure, unguarded, filled the space between them. For the Pastonton, first time in a long while, he felt something inside him unclench. "You fixed him," she said, holding up the teddy bear. "He looks happy again." Ryan smiled. "I think he missed you." She giggled. "He told me he did." Emily stood in the doorway, hand pressed to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as she watched them. The man who had saved her life, and the daughter who had given her a reason to live. "Come in," she said softly. "Please." He stepped inside. The house smelled of coffee and sunlight, the kind of warmth that only a home filled with healing can have. The living room was scattered with crayons, coloring books, and the innocent chaos of a child rediscovering joy. They sat together at the kitchen table. Lily showed him her drawings, some of flowers, some of stars, and one of a man in a blue uniform standing beside her and her mom. Above them, in big, uneven letters, she had written, "Family." Ryan swallowed hard. "That's beautiful, Lily." She beamed. "You said I was brave, so I drew brave things." He looked at her, eyes soft. "You're braver than anyone I know." Emily placed a cup of coffee in front of him, her hand brushing his. "She hasn't had a nightmare since the trial ended," she said quietly. "Before that, she couldn't sleep alone. But now, she says she dreams about helping people." Ryan nodded, eyes glancing toward the window. Outside, the garden was alive with color. Daisies, lavender, sunlight dancing through leaves. The world looked whole again. Emily's voice trembled. "You didn't just save us that night. You gave her courage again." He looked at her, humbled, his voice barely above a whisper. "She gave it to me first." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the faint chirping of birds outside. A quiet symphony of peace replacing the echoes of sirens and screams that once filled their nights. Lily crawled onto his lap, resting her head against his chest. "Are you still a police officer?" she asked sleepily. He hesitated. "I'm thinking about it." "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Because sometimes even good people get tired of fighting." She looked up at him, frowning in that serious way only a child can. "But heroes don't quit." Her words hit him harder than she could ever know. He laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You've been talking to your mom, haven't you?" Emily smiled. "She listens better than most adults." Ryan chuckled, but his eyes glistened. "You're right, kiddo. Heroes don't quit." They stayed like that. A quiet trio bound not by blood, but by survival, gratitude, and something deeper. Trust. When it was time to leave, Ryan stood by the door, holding the teddy bear one last time before handing it back. "He's all yours now." Lily looked confused. "But I said we'd share him." Ryan knelt down, meeting her eyes. "We already do. Every time you hug him, he remembers me. And every time I think of you, I'll remember why I do what I do." She hugged him again, tight. "You promise you'll come visit?" He smiled. "Promise." Emily walked him to the porch. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. You already have, he replied. You both have. They stood there a moment, watching Lily chase a butterfly across the yard, her laughter ringing through the air. She's going to be okay, Emily said. Ryan nodded. Yeah, you both are. He turned to leave, then paused. Take care of each other. As he walked down the path, he glanced back one last time. Emily waved, and Lily held the teddy bear high in the air, as if showing the world her proof that monsters can be beaten, and heroes, even the quiet ones, keep their promises. Ryan smiled to himself as he reached his car. For the first time in a long while, the weight on his chest felt lighter. He looked at the setting sun, its reflection gleaming off the badge resting on his dashboard. Maybe I'll stay a little longer. The sound of birds filled the evening air. The world, once filled with pain, now felt still, not silent, but at peace. And in that quiet, somewhere between past and future, hope breathed again. Dawn crept over the city, like a slow exhale, painting the skyline in soft gold and gray. The streets were quiet, washed clean by the night's rain. In that fragile hour before the world fully woke, a patrol car rolled through the stillness, headlights cutting through the mist. Behind the wheel sat Officer Ryan Hale, the same man who once stood in the crossfire between truth and ruin, now steady, composed, and somehow lighter. The morning light brushed his face as he turned down familiar streets, windows cracked open to let in the smell of wet asphalt and new beginnings. The radio murmured softly, dispatch codes blending into the hum of the engine. But Ryan wasn't listening to the words. He was listening to the silence between them, that rare kind of peace that only comes after surviving chaos. He passed the elementary school where children were starting to arrive, backpacks bouncing, laughter filling the air. For a fleeting moment, he smiled. Somewhere among them was a little girl who had once saved him, even when she didn't know it. The world kept moving, as it always did, but something in him had changed. His hand brushed the small folded drawing he kept in his vest pocket. Lily's picture, worn at the corners but still bright. The crayon figures still held their smiles. A man in blue, a little girl, and the word, hero. The light turned green. He drove on. Across town, the morning sun streamed through the window of a cozy living room. The teddy bear, clean, stitched, and whole, sat on the sill, bathed in soft light. Lily was at the table with her crayons again, her tongue poking out in concentration. Her therapist sat beside her, watching with quiet admiration. That's a beautiful drawing, Lily. Who are you drawing today? Lily grinned. It's Officer Ryan. He's helping people again. The therapist nodded gently. He helped you too, didn't he? The little girl's voice softened. Yeah, he helped me not be scared anymore. She switched crayons, adding a streak of yellow across the paper. Sunlight, bright and hopeful. Mom says we're all a little brave, even if we don't wear badges. Her mother appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. Your mom's right, Emily said, smiling. And I think your friend Ryan would agree. Lily turned the drawing around, showing it proudly. Look, Mommy. I drew him smiling. Emily's eyes filled, but this time, not from sadness. He deserves to. Back on the streets, Ryan pulled his cruiser to a stop at a red light. A family crossed the road, a mother holding her child's hand. He watched them pass, the sunlight glinting off their faces, and a faint, grateful smile curved his lips. The city that once seemed full of danger now looked almost tender. Imperfect, yes, but worth protecting. A voice, calm, reflective, seemed to echo in the background, as if carried by the wind itself. Sometimes, justice doesn't come from the gavel, but from the smallest voice in the room. Ryan's fingers tapped the steering wheel, the rhythm of quiet determination. He wasn't looking for recognition. He wasn't chasing redemption. He had found it. In a child's trust. In a mother's forgiveness. In the stillness of a city learning to heal. The radio crackled again. Unit 4-2, report of a lost child near Riverside Park. Ryan smiled faintly. Copy that. On my, way. The tires rolled forward, blending into the waking heartbeat of the city. Lily, in her therapy session, drawing more pictures, each one brighter, fuller of color, a reflection of a heart slowly mending. Emily, writing in her journal by the window, pausing to look outside at her daughter playing with neighborhood kids, laughter echoing. Ryan, visiting the precinct, greeted by nods and quiet respect from fellow officers who now understood the cost of courage. Detective Cole, standing in his office watching the news report of Gaines's sentencing, a small, satisfied smile tugging at his mouth before he returns to his paperwork. Then the screen fades to Ryan again, standing at the edge of the city, dawn fully broken now. The skyline glows, golden and alive. He places his cap back on, the badge catching the light. For a moment he closes his eyes. In his mind, he hears a little girl's voice. "You're my hero." He opens his eyes and whispers, "No, kiddo, you're mine." He turns, walking toward his cruiser as the world wakes around him. Horns, footsteps, the hum of life resuming. The camera lingers on the empty window of the Moore household, where the teddy bear sits in perfect stillness. Sunlight streams through the glass, bathing it in warmth. The stitches on its ear glow faintly, reminders not of what was broken, but what was healed. The narrator's voice returns, gentle and final. In a world full of noise, truth speaks softly. It doesn't shout. It endures. In the hands that protect. The hearts that forgive. And the courage that lives on in the smallest souls. The frame holds on the teddy bear, unmoving, eternal, as the light grows brighter, until it's almost blinding. Fade to white. Soft piano music swells, not mournful, but tender. The story ends where it began, not in a courtroom, not in chaos, but in quiet truth. And for anyone still watching, heart heavy and eyes wet, the message is simple, yet unforgettable. Heroes don't always wear medals. Sometimes, they just keep their promises. When you spend enough time around dogs, especially a German shepherd, you realize they aren't just pets. They're partners, guardians, souls who somehow understand our silence better than most people ever could. Their loyalty doesn't come from training or treats. It comes from love, the kind that asks for nothing in return. Stories like this remind us that animals aren't just part of our lives. They make our lives fuller, softer, and more human. And maybe that's why we owe them the same kind of devotion they give us, every single day. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that quiet connection, that wordless promise of love and trust, you might enjoy learning ways to deepen that bond even more. Because in the end, it's not about training or perfection. It's about love, understanding, and the moments that remind us why dogs truly are our best friends.